Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov chess channel, and welcome to the Computer Chess Championship Season 11 finals. So, we had now many rounds playing between the two top engines, Leela C Zero and Stockfish, and today I wanted to show you a great game from the round 141, in which Stockfish played with the white pieces against Leela C Zero in the Benoni defense. And the funny thing is that Stockfish and Leela C Zero played, of course, the same opening with the white pieces and won their games. So basically, this Benoni is not such a good opening. I think it's not even played anymore in this top grandmaster level. I haven't seen now Magnus Carlsen or Fabiano Caruana playing the Benoni in a while now, because there is this problem about the Benoni. It's the pawn structure in the center, and in this game that I wanted to show you today, played by Stockfish with the white pieces against the Benoni defense, the Stockfish will exploit all of the weaknesses, I think, of the Benoni, and then you'll see how dangerous it can be to play this particular opening. So let's see the game. Here d4 played by Stockfish, knight to f6 by Leela C Zero, c4, c5, d5. We can still transpose sometimes into the Benoni, into the Benko gambit, which is, I think, one of the most aggressive lines which black can choose here. In the game, e6 was played by Leela C Zero. Here we have knight to c3, and now e takes d5. We have c takes d5, and now bishop to d6. This idea of the bishop to d6 is sort of a positional idea, because black is trying to play bishop to c7, then play bishop to f5, challenging the knight on c3, and forcing here really after the move e4 some weaknesses, because the knight is attacking the e4. White would love to play the move e4, but this is now this positional idea of blacks to somehow attack this knight, which is the key defender of this e4 square. So in the game, knight to f3 was played by Stockfish, which is the best move, I think, because now we are threatening e4, e5. So the knight is supporting this very important square e5. Black will need at least two more tempos in order to attack the knight. So here, after bishop to c7, now it's the move e4. Here, if you try bishop to a5 immediately, then you get e5. That's the problem. That's why this knight to f3 is very important, to get this central control with both of our knights of these pawns here that are dominating in the center of the board. If you try knight to e4, it's not so dangerous. We can play simply queen to d3, and after something like f5, in order to keep here this knight outpost on e4, I think bishop to et is perfectly fine, keeping the game calm. After something like castle, we can also castle. So this knight is really endangered now, and after you take maybe knight to c3, b takes c3, and now we would support even the d5 more with this potential c4 move. And now this pawn central control, I think, is too much to handle here for black. This is, I think, game over in this top engine level. I think white will win this game very, very easily. So after the move e4, here Leela C Zero plays the move d6, preventing this e5 pawn breakthrough immediately. And now we have h3 here played by Stockfish, preventing also bishop to g4 ideas, because in some occasions black would love to play something like bishop to g4 and give up even here this light square bishop, is because the light square bishop has troubles in the Benoni defense. You don't know where to develop it, basically. And with this h3 move, which is really a great prophylactic move here played by Stockfish, now you see the bishop's activity, the light square bishop's activity of blacks is simply a bad one. You don't have good squares for the bishop, so this is, I think a great move played by Stockfish. So in the game, castling was played, bishop to d3, supporting this e4 pawn even more. The e4 can be sometimes a problem for white in the continuation of the Benoni, because rook to e8 is followed with some dangerous attacks against this pawn on e4. This is the main weakness of white in this setup. The main weakness in black's position is the pawn on d6. So these strategical elements. Black will try, of course, to attack the e4 with also some a4 b5 pawn breakthrough possibilities, getting some expanse on the queen side. Here, on the other hand, white will try f4 e5 pawn breakthroughs. So these are the so-called opposite side attack games, in which black and white have their advantages and disadvantages on both of the sides of the board. Here, after bishop to d3, rook to e8, the common move, also with some some dangerous attacks. Knight to e4 is a serious threat, and followed with f5 because the king is still in the center. So that's why here castling play by Stockfish. Now we have the e4 pawn secured, and now it's time to play something like bishop to f4, knight to d2, and f4 if the position allows it. Maybe something like bishop to g3, creating our e5 pawn breakthrough. As you see, the dangerous strategy of this e5 pawn breakthrough. If you have troubles while playing against the Benoni defense, I think one of the main ideas is this e5 pawn breakthrough, cracking the position around this d6 square, d6 pawn, and now you see how Stockfish creates that in really a perfect way. So knight from b to d7 was played. Bishop to f4, we have a6, we have a4, preventing of course this b5 pawn breakthrough here by black. Knight to f8 with the preparation to play something like knight to g6, kicking away this bishop. This bishop is very annoying. It's similar, like if you're familiar with the London system, this bishop is always aiming on this d6 with the possibility to push the pawn here on e5. Of course it has to be more prepared, but this, I said, is the main strategical idea here of whites. In the game, knight to d2 was played. The main idea is to protect our e4 pawn even more, but the more important thing is that we want to have this square for a knight. The knight is perfectly fine here on c4, attacking even further this d6 weakness. Now the idea is to play bishop to g3, f4, knight to c4, and then e5. So you see how Stockfish, not that only Stockfish protects the weakness, Stockfish really attacks the main weaknesses in black's position. Here knight to g6 was played, but not a problem. We can play simply bishop to g3. You see, if you make a mistake, you can play bishop to h2, but you have taken away your square for the king. You'll see also in the importance of this h2 square, because here bishop to g3 perfectly fine. You cannot kick away further the bishop with knight to h5 because the queen is covering that square. So that's why here, although we have a good defensive setup, but still this knights are a little bit out of game. They're not supporting any attacks of blacks, and we would love to have maybe some support of this knights, because our main idea, as I said, from black's perspective, is this b5 pawn breakthrough. So in the game, rook to b8, again preparing this b5 move, and now rook to e1. You see how both of the sides playing first the simple chess, protecting their weaknesses, then maybe if the position allows it, it's time for an immediate attack. Here bishop to d7, here b5 is so far not possible, although there are many gambit lines here that black can try, maybe to simplify the position with sort of a gambit, with sacrificing a pawn just to get an active game. But here white has a pure domination of this b5 square. We can simply take a takes b5. After a takes b5, we can take with our knight takes b5, and if you try knight to e5 here, then bishop to f1 is perfectly fine with the preparation to finally get this f4 pawn breakthrough. So this knight is protecting. You cannot attack it basically here with this bishop, because you lose maybe your bishop here on c7. So as said, this is now, I think, a completely winning position for white. So after bishop to d7, we have now finally knight to c4, attacking here this d6 weakness. So that's why knight to e5 had to be played here by Leela C Zero. But there is a positional problem about this knight outpost, because this knight is not supported by another minor piece. It's only supported by the rook. So after potential trades of pieces, after something like bishop takes e5, you have to recapture with the pawn, and that's a huge strategical disadvantage here for black, because if you recapture with the pawn, I just want you to imagine now the position, then white is left with this supported pass pawn. The supported pass pawn is a huge strategical advantage. If you manage to do that, I think you have a comfortable game. So after knight to d5, we have always the possibility to get rid of this knight, because black hasn't secured the perfect blockade. We would love to have maybe our knight on d7, and then if something captures, then we can recapture with our knight, again fixing the position around the square e5. So far it's not possible, because the only defender of the e5 is the rook on e8. So that's why it's not a perfect blockade that Leela C Zero has prepared here. So that's why here b3 was played. If you try something like knight to c4, again it's not a problem. I think we can simply recapture b takes c4, and again b5 is not a possibility because we can simply take. After a takes b5, we can take with the knight, and if you trade off maybe your bishop, your bad bishop, for an active knight, still we have now a very dangerous pawn which is supported by the bishop. And now this is something that black is always to worry about. This is really a supported pass pawn. Still we have our main possibilities to play f4, e5 pawn breakthrough. So I think again white has a comfortable game. So if you here in this position after b3 take out the bishop, it's also not so good, I think, because you're giving up your active knight for bad bishop, because the bad bishop was blocked out by its pawn anyway. So here giving up a centralized knight for a bad bishop with knight takes d3 after queen to d3, again b5 is not a possibility, because first we can take this d6 weakness. So you see the d6 weakness is always present in this Benoni setups. There is really something that you have to worry about here from black's perspective. Here after knight to d6, again the evaluation is simply winning for white. So after b3, h6 was played with the preparation maybe to play something like knight to h7 and maybe some f5 pawn breakthroughs, but this is simply too slow. Here in the game, queen to d2 played by Stockfish, and now Leela C Zero tries finally the move b5. But you see now the problems that I've explained now a couple of minutes ago. Now we can play on our main strategical advantage of this supported pass pawn. Here Stockfish simply took knight takes e5, and you see you have to recapture with the pawn. Here after d takes e5, now we have the supported pass pawn, and this is a huge strategical advantage here for white. Here Stockfish will play simply on this advantage, and it will crush really Leela C Zero with some dangerous pawn breakthroughs. The more important thing is that pawns are not connected here anymore. In the center we have the c5 weakness, we have also this e5 weakness. So now we should try here an f4 pawn breakthrough, because then if that happens, if we deflect this pawn on the e file, on the f file, then we have two connected pass pawns, and this would be very dangerous to handle here for black. This would be also a very nice strategical element here of white. So in the game, queen to e2, attacking now the light squares, forcing now Leela C Zero to simplify the position here on the queen side, because there is a certain pawn storm here. We have a situation in which black has this advantage on the queen side. Here this pawn storm with the 3 pawns against 2 pawns here on the queen side, but here queen to e2 is perfectly fine, challenging now black to do something here on the queen side. If you try c4 here, again I don't think it's a problem. We can simply take b takes c4, and if you try here to push b4, we can simply go back knight to b1 after something like a5 in order to support our pass pawn. Now we can try even c5, or we can try knight to d2 after something like bishop to d6. We can try knight to b3, and now the c5 move is a serious threat. If you try maybe something like queen to e7, then I think we can even go with the move f4. Of course it has to be prepared, but this f4 move would be really dangerous now. Or we could try something like f3, bishop to f2, and then c5. So if we manage to get this pawn through on c5, I think it's game over for black. So after queen to e2, b takes a4 was played. Now knight takes a4, bishop takes, and now b takes a4. Now we have a simplified position here on the queen side. I hope you realize these are 3 weak pawns now that white can attack. On the other hand, these pawns are perfectly fine. They are connected, they are supported. We can even support it even further with the move f3, but this f3 would be a little bit risky. You don't need to do that, because then you're leaving a little bit your f4 weakness, because in some occasions black would try something like knight on h5 and then maybe an outpost on f4. So that's why here in the game Leela C Zero attacks this weakness, this support of this pawn, which is of course this e4 pawn. And now Stockfish plays simply rook to c1, attacking the main weakness now in black's position. It's the pawn on c5. You see queen to d7, and here Leela C Zero builds sort of a blocking system, but it's always bad if you have to block out the position with your queen. You would love to do that with your minor piece, but you have to do it with your queen if you want to maybe create sort of a battery on the b file. Here the rooks are not connected, the rooks are a little bit loose on the board, and now rook to a2 played by Stockfish, trying of course rook to c2, attacking further this c5 weakness. We have rook to from e to b8, now rook to c2, bishop to b6, again a defensive move which again cuts off the connection between the rooks, so white has a favorable game here, and we can always take this pawn on a6. This is not a problem. As I said, our main strategical idea is this f4 pawn breakthrough. You see how Stockfish patiently prepares this f4 move, not rushing into position, simply improving first all of the pieces, then if the position allows it, then it's time to push the f4. So here a5, if you take bishop takes a5, then we get this pawn, which is more important. It's a centralized pawn, although here black has still this pass pawn on the a file. It's always an object of white's attack. We have a perfect battery on like squares. We have the more important thing is that we have now a perfect attack here on the c file. The queen is a little bit endangered. We could try something like rook to c6, then even d6 is a possibility. So that's why here after a5, Leela C Zero couldn't take here this pawn. So that's why bishop to a7 was played. Now bishop to c4, supporting even more our pawn. Now again preparing this f4 move. Here rook to a4, attacking the a5 weakness, but it's not a problem. We can leave this pawn. We want to play on our central domination here. That's why rook to d2, supporting now the d5 pawn. Here in the game rook to a3 was played, and now rook to d3, trying to simplify the position, because these rooks are a little bit annoying if they're connected. Of course, maybe get rid of one of these rooks is a good idea. Simplify the position going into a favorable endgame with the bishop pair. Rook to a5 was played, and now we have finally this move f4. Now it's time to attack, because the c4 bishop to c4 was a very important move. There were some tactical threats, maybe with some discovered attack possibilities if black pushes the pawn on c4 here. So after f4 we have knight to d7, and now we have f takes e5, knight takes e5, and of course bishop takes e5. Here queen takes e5, and now queen to f1. Now the main idea is to attack somehow here this f7 weakness, because there are threats here to play the move d6. So if you take here, for instance, queen takes e4, then d6 is very dangerous. You have to bring the rook back here to f8, but now rook to f3. And how you're gonna defend now this f7 weakness? If you try something like queen to g6, you see this pawn is really dangerous. This was now our supported pass pawn, which Stockfish has created. How to stop it? You have to maybe go back, but if you try something even like bishop to b6, I think we can go something like rook to e1, and then even here rook to e8 is a serious threat. This rook is, as I said, out of game. It's a little bit loose on the board. It doesn't have a good connection with these other pieces of black. So this is now, I think, again, a completely winning position for white. So after this move, queen to f1, you see how tricky it was to giving up here this pawn, but you cannot take it. That's why rook to f8 was played, and now we have d6. Now this pawn is marching on. Here bishop to b8 was played, trying to somehow attack this pawn, but it's not possible, because here Stockfish has a perfect attack. Rook to d5, first attacking the queen, after queen to g3. Now we have e5, and again these pawns are marching, again these pawns are connected, and let's evaluate the position a little bit. You see how Stockfish pieces are really glued together. So this queen is supporting the rook is supporting the bishop is supporting this rook, so the queen is supporting the bishop, the rook is supporting the e5 pawn, the e5 pawn is protecting the d6 pawn, the rook is protecting the d6 pawn. So a perfect harmony, I think, here with in white's position. Great game, I think, by Stockfish. Maybe this was really Stockfish's best game in this super finals of this CCC season 11. I really was satisfied with how Stockfish played in this particular game. Great attack. Basically, in this particular position, black is lost. You see how Stockfish will continue to attack and really attack these light square weaknesses that black has in the position, because there are now several tactical threats on the square f7. This rook is only protecting this f7, so if the position clears on light squares, then we would have some battery possibilities here and really attack the weakness. In the game, rook to a3 was played, and now king to h1, simply hiding the king from these dark squares. Rook to e3 was played, and now queen to f5. If we try rook to e1 immediately, it's not a problem. We can simply take, rook takes, queen takes e1, and now we can go king to h2. You don't have any more checks, and now a bishop to d3 is a serious threat because we are already threatening checkmate. You would be forced to play something like g6, and now queen to f4, attacking this h6 weakness again. If you try something like queen to a2, we could go bishop to c4, attacking the queen and also supporting our rook. If you try something like queen to b2, we can simply take, I think, here this pawn on h6. You cannot take, of course, the pawn. The next threat is somehow maybe rook to d1, and queen to g6 is a serious threat because the bishop is covering here this very important diagonal. So in the game, that's why after queen to f5, king to h8 was played, finally getting out of this light square mess that Stockfish has prepared here. Now rook to f1, simply creating further our battery on the f-file and also attacking this f7 weakness. Rook to e1, but now it's a similar position again. Rook takes, king to h2, and now queen to h4. At least in this position, in this scenario, Leela C Zero brings some defenders around the king, but it's again a little bit too late here. Stockfish has an extra tempo, simply takes out this weakness, this pawn on a6. We have g6, queen to f3, and now king to g8, now g3, kicking away the queen. We have bishop to b4, and now queen to e2, very important move. Now we want to again glue our pieces together, which Stockfish does really good here in this continuation of the game. Now our main idea is to again play calm, bishop to c4, again with the possibilities to play a pawn breakthrough here in e6 and exploit this light square weaknesses that black has in the position. So in the game, h5 was played. Now comes this move, bishop to c4, a natural move. We have h4, and now what would you do? Would you take or pass through here with the move g4? So if you play g4, that's a firm pawn structure that you have, but here Stockfish plays the correct move. It's a great move, g takes h4, although the pawn structure is not so healthy in front of your king anymore, but you see now the importance of this pawn here on h4 because it has some possibilities here to march on the square h5 and then even further attacking these weaknesses in black's position, so attacking here the g6 pawn. In the game, king to g7 was played, getting our king on a dark square, finally get out of this really messy situation here. This bishop is has this potential of attacking the black's king, really annoying stuff to handle here for black. After bishop to c4, you see there were always these tactical possibilities. In the game, queen to f1 was played with the preparation to play even queen to f6 checks here, which are also dangerous. That's why f6 was played, and now h5. You see now in the importance of Stockfish that Stockfish took the pawn on h4. Now if you try f takes e5 to attack the queen, now you have h6 deflecting the king from the defense of the rook. You have to play something like rook to g8, but now we can try rook to e5, discovered attack by the rook, by the bishop on the king. So you have to take with the queen, and now after queen to c4, it's game over. So that's why after h5, queen to c3 was played, attacking here the e5 weakness, but now again Stockfish plays a perfect move, queen to f4. Here queen to b2, you have several checks, but it's not a problem. King to g1, here after queen to b1 we have bishop to f1, and again if you try f takes e5, again the same thing happens. We have first this move h6. If you try king to g8, then h7, marching on, again deflecting this king from the defense of the rook. If king to g7, then of course we have first queen takes f8, king takes, and now we can promote to another queen, and this is again game over for black. So that's why after bishop to f1, queen to e1 was played. Leela C Zero is desperately trying to bring some defenders around the king, but it's again too late. Here king to g2, now you don't have any more checks here. That's the most important thing. Now we can play really freely. Queen to b1 was played, and now we have e takes f6, rook takes f6, and now again this idea h6. So you have to go king to f7, protecting the rook. But now again, this very annoying discovered attack possibilities with the move queen to c4. You see, you're also protecting your bishop on f1. So in this position, black is simply lost. Here Leela C Zero tried to defend somehow. Queen to b7, attacking the rook, because white would love to play some discovered attack possibilities with the move rook to f5, creating a very dangerous threat. So that's why this is sort of a pinning idea here by Leela C Zero. But now we have a simple move, king to g1, and now queen to d7 was played, and now here now finally we get use of our light squares. We get use of the problems that black has here on light squares. We have the perfect move, rook to f5. Discovered attack here by Stockfish. You have only one natural move, queen to e6, but now here you can pause the video and try to find again the best next move. It's a great move here that Stockfish finds. Really, it's the move rook to e5. Attacking the queen, you have to trade off the queens or you lost, because here after queen to c4 we have bishop to c4, and now we have even a forced checkmate sequence. It's a forced checkmate in 8. After rook to e6, if you try something else, king to f8 or similar ideas, then we can simply push forward. Here the pawn, you cannot catch up with this pawn. If you try something like bishop to c7, then rook to e8, and it's again a very nice checkmate. You see the importance of this pawn. This pawn is really an annoying pawn. I think it's one of the most annoying pawns in chess history. Here this pawn on h6, so that's why again after queen to c4 we have bishop to c4, and now Leela C Zero is forced to bring the rook in between. But now after rook takes e6 we have bishop to a7, another problem. Here rook to e7, a double check, king to f6, now h7, bishop to b8, we have the queen, king to g5, and now rook to e5, king to f4, now queen to f6, king on g3, and now rook to e3. It's a very nice checkmate here on the third rank with the support of the queen and this pawn. It was a great game here played by by Stockfish. So great attack. I think it was the best game played by Stockfish in this super finals, although Leela C Zero managed to win the game also in the next round. In this particular opening, Leela C Zero kept the advantage of 4 points in front of Stockfish. So I think this finals is simply going to Leela C Zero. So Leela C Zero will win this CCC season 11. Not many rounds are to play anymore. I think still 5 rounds to play, and I don't think that Stockfish can catch up. Stockfish will need to win every game now if Stockfish wants to win this super final. So, but I think that's not going to happen, because Leela C Zero was simply slightly better in the super finals and deserves to win the season. So okay, I hope you enjoyed this game. This was, I think, a great attack by Stockfish. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games played by computers with some more Leela C Zero, Stockfish, and Alpha Zero games. And you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.